Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name's Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. We're always excited when we get to do an event from the field, and today's event is going to be pretty awesome. We are going to be joined by Dr. Jim Thomson. He's an oceanographer in the Applied Physics Laboratory at the University of Washington. He's currently chasing storms off the coast of Alaska and measuring the impact of big waves crashing into newly formed autumn ice. He's on board the 261-foot research vessel Sikuliaq, the US's newest Arctic research vessel, and it is outfitted with the most state-of-the-art technology for doing all kinds of amazing research in the northern reaches of our planet. So Jim, it's so great to have you joining us live today via the magic of satellite. We're excited to learn a little more about what you're up to, tour a little bit of the ship. And yeah, we've got students joining us all across North America, both on YouTube and live on camera with us. And they're going to have a ton of questions for us.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to get a chance to tell you what we're doing up here.
So Jim, why don't we get things started? Why don't you tell us a little bit? Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're up to.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, again, my name's Jim. I work at the University of Washington, and I am here on the ship, the research vessel Sikuliaq. We are north of Alaska in the Arctic Ocean. We're at about 72 degrees north. It's very dark up here right now. Winter is just about here. We're really at the, seeing the big effects of fall. And I'll take you outside in a moment and show you just how dark and cold this place is. So right now we're in the main lab of the ship. And you can see some people around that are working, and there's some quiet work happening in here. But as we get further out on deck, there's a lot of activity happening right now. And that's the way it is in the ship. The ship is running 24 hours a day. There's always something going on, different science teams, different projects, different things happening all the time. It's a really unique opportunity to be out here and collect this data. So we try to make every minute count. We try to have something happen 24 hours a day. And again, there's really not any light up here anymore. So it kind of doesn't matter whether it's daytime or nighttime. It's all the same to us. So we're sort of always working. So in here is all the computers and some of the small equipment we're working on it. But if I take you outside, we'll start to see some bigger equipment. So to head outside through the next lab and then further out onto deck, we got to dress a little bit. We need to be a little bit warmer than we are right now. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of my gear. I'm not going to be out for hours, so I'm not going to put on everything. We have these big suits we wear if we're out for several hours, or if we're going to go out and walk on the sea ice, which we do sometimes if the sea ice is thick enough. If it's safe, we do that. But for just heading on deck right now, I'll just grab a couple things. So my stuff's hanging over here. Everyone's kind of got their spot. And the number one thing I have is this big jacket here. And this jacket's really cool because it's a jacket to keep me warm, but it also has a built-in life jacket. It floats. So I always wear this because it's got, good flotation. It's good safety jacket. It's also got, my pockets are full of all my stuff. So I don't have to remember all my stuff every time. Got my headlamp. I've got some tape. Got a knife. I've got all the stuff that I might want. I've also got an emergency beacon that we all carry our own emergency beacons in our other pocket. And that would be just if something really awful happened, like you fell off the ship, you'd want the ship to come back and be able to get you, right? So those kind of things are really important. If we were doing a lot of big work on deck, I'd grab my hard hat and wear that. But the cranes aren't running right now. I just checked in with the deck crew, and they said right now we've just finished an operation and we're starting to transit. We're starting to travel to the next station. So I'm not going to worry about that one. But I am going to stress a little bit just to keep the chill off. I think the air temperature right now is about 10 or 15 degrees Fahrenheit. That's actually one of the warmer temperatures we've seen. It's been colder than that. And then there's always the wind chill. So that can make it a little bit colder. So it's probably going to feel like about, 0 Fahrenheit out there. So well below freezing. Again, it's fall. This is when the Arctic starts to freeze up. So got my nice big gloves, really waterproof. So if we're handling anything that came on and off the ship, we got that. So this is enough to go out for a little bit. So I'll take you out through the next lab space. So you can see in here, there's a lot of activity. One of the other projects on board is sampling all of the small fish, the polar cod that live up here year round, and all the rest of the animals that live up here. And they've just done a big sampling, a big collection, and they're processing everything and trying to see everything that's there. So it's pretty busy in here, and we'll probably have a bunch of them coming and going as we get further out. But this is really cool. They're able to actually sample. They catch some of these little tiny polar cod, and these amazing little fish live up here in these cold, cold, icy waters. They live just beneath the ice. So it's pretty spectacular that they're able to get a few of these little fish and study them. Okay, let's keep going into one of my favorite spots called the Baltic Room. Oh, there's a polar cod. All right.
I'm going to put it back in the water so it doesn't get too stressed out.
That is amazing to me, because you think these little fish, they look like such fragile little things, and they live up here in the harshest environment, right? If you put one of us in the water underneath the sea ice, we might make it 10 minutes, and then we'd be goners. Those little fish live up here year round. It's amazing. Okay, so come on out, follow me out here into the Baltic Room. So we call this the Baltic Room, and the Baltic Room, you can think of it like if you have a mud room in your house, a place where you go from the cold outside and you come and stop inside. And like I said, there are gonna be a lot of people coming and going because there's a lot going on. So come on through, guys. There's work to be done. So this is the room where it's a little bit indoors, a little bit outdoors, and there's always stuff happening in here. And we try to keep the mess in here for the most part. You know, this has drains that the water can just flow back out to sea, that sort of thing. And so one of the key instruments in here is, we call it a CTD. And we have lots of acronyms around here. The CTD stands for conductivity, temperature, and depth. It's this big instrument over here. And the actual CTD part is just at the bottom. This is Jared, and I'll let him tell you what he's seen in this collection in a second here. The CTD, conductivity, temperature, and depth, that is really one of our key measurements of what's happening in the ocean. The conductivity part, that tells us how much salt is in the ocean. Temperature part's pretty obvious, right? Tells us about the temperature. And so that's one of the things we're always measuring, and we want to do it as a profile with depth. So we measure depth. So conductivity, temperature, and depth. That tells us how warm or cold the ocean is, how salty or fresh it is, and then how that is in a profile. The other thing that's remarkable about this setup is that these bottles, they close at a specified depth, and we can collect a water sample down there at 100 meters or at 1,000 meters, or we do this at 4,000 meters sometimes, 4 kilometers below the ocean. So the site we were just at, I think we went to about 300 meters. What did we go to, Jared?
Yeah, we went to about 300 meters this morning, right before our fishing event. So at a particular station, we like to get all the variables that we see in the water column, from the water, the zooplankton, all the way up to the fish. And we also have seabird observers on board. So we're kind of integrating the whole ecosystem into the study. And I'm a PhD student, like many of you guys out there. I'm still studying away, but I'm lead oceanographer for the biological team on board. So every day, every station, I come out here and prep this CTD carousel, which includes the CTD instrument at the bottom, as Jim said, but also this ring of bottles that go around the entire operation here. So at certain depths, we can trigger any number of bottles that we want, bringing that little piece of the water column back to the surface to sample. And that's what I'm doing here with these bottles. I'm collecting these little tiny bottles from those depths to take back into the laboratory, and I'll filter those through fine mesh little tiny filters, and we'll take those back into the lab, and we'll conduct experiments on those, trying to find out how much chlorophyll is in the water, how many nutrients are in the water, and all sorts of things like that. So it's very, very intricate, very technologically advanced, but it all comes down to the bottles in the end and getting that water into the form that we want it.
All right. Thanks, Jared. So one of the things I think is really cool about this setup is the ship is meant for working in the Arctic. So you have to be able to deal with the cold all the time, and everything wants to freeze all the time because it's so dark and cold. So the cool setup with this rig is that there's a door in the side of the ship. And this is called the Baltic Room door, and it's huge. It's probably 8 feet by 12 feet, and it's on a big hydraulic arm. And when we want to do one of these CTD casts, we want to put this in the water, that whole thing comes out, slides over, and then we've got the ocean right there. We can put the boom out and then lower this down on the wire. And then when we're all done, we can bring it back in, close that off, and get it warm again in here and keep all the instruments from freezing. So we can get that measurement of the water that is right at the freezing point, but then we can quickly get the instruments up and running again. The other thing that's in the Baltic Room right now is some gear that we're prepping for the next phase. And this gear these are wave buoys. We call them swift buoys. And we make these ourselves in my lab. And it's been a really fun project to develop them. If any of you students are working with things like Raspberry Pi or Arduino boards or those kind of small single board computers, that's what's inside of here. And then we have all these different sensors that record their data on that. And then they send that data via satellite to a server in Seattle, and that's where the data ends up. And then we get it back to the ship also. So there's a big storm in the forecast. It's about 2 days from now, and we're really excited about it. We've been watching the forecast. We've got a team on shore that are constantly talking to us back and forth over satellite saying, hey, here's what it's looking like. Here's the forecast. You need to be over here, and then it's going to move through this way. And so we're going to take all these buoys and put them all out throughout the Arctic Ocean as this storm is building and try to measure the waves, the ice as it forms, the winds, and see how the ice is starting to protect the coast. Because that's what usually happens in the fall. As the ice starts to form, then the waves, they get basically dissipated is the word we use. They get smaller when they're in the ice. And so we're trying to understand that process, understand how much the presence of sea ice can protect the coast. And the big picture question there is, if there's no more sea ice, which is the direction the climate is going, then what happens to that coastline? It's no longer protected. That's the big what if question that we're trying to do. That's our hypothesis, is that if there's no more sea ice, then these coasts are going to start to erode dramatically. And we think we're already seeing some of that. So we're after a deeper understanding of that. Okay, so that's what's in the Baltic Room. Now let's head all the way outside and see if we can see any ice. But remember, it's going to be pretty dark. Okay, so we're out on deck here. I'm on the starboard rail. This is a place where we work a lot because it's a pretty easy place to put small buoys and things in by hand over here. And you can see a little bit of sea ice out here. This is pretty new, young ice. The ship is it's pretty easy for the ship to make a path through this stuff. I'm gonna guess it's about 5 centimeters thick, something like that. So this isn't quite the kind of stuff I would walk on. We're pretty cautious about, when we put people on the ice. So if we wanted a sample of this ice, instead of getting out on the ice and taking our ice drills and getting a core sample, we actually just have some big fishing nets, and we would just take the net and put it over and we'd get a sample that way. That's a lot safer, right? Then I just have to make sure I don't fall overboard. And of course, we'd have a bunch of people out here doing it all together, watching. We're always looking out for each other on the ship. The ship it's a dangerous place. There's a lot of big machinery, a lot of heavy equipment. And so we're always thinking safety first. We're always spend a lot of time planning and talking through everything before we do it. And then as we're doing it, we're all looking out for each other, making sure everyone's in a safe spot. So that's a quick look at the ice. You can see it's really varied. And one of the things I want you to understand about the Arctic ice cap is how much it varies, how much it melts every summer. And in the recent summers, it melts a lot. And then how it reforms in the winter when it gets dark and cold. So it has this big seasonal cycle, winter to summer. And then within a given spot, how much it varies. And there's little patches of open water, there's patches of thicker ice. And it's really got its own sort of topography to it. And it evolves constantly and it moves a lot. It's often drifting at a couple miles per hour. And so even though if you look at a satellite photo, you just see this big ice pack. It's just this big white cap at the poles. And we think, oh, that's kind of boring up there. It's not boring at all. There's a lot going on. Things are always in motion. Things are always changing. And trying to keep up with it is part of what we're doing here on the ship. And it's actually a really hard job. Sometimes we miss it too. I would say about a week or two ago, we kind of missed the forecast and we didn't quite get the data we wanted, but we've got another chance to try again. And so that's what we're always doing, trying to refine the approach, try again. So a couple other things to see on the ship here. If you look up, this is one of the big cranes. You see the crane pedestal, and then further up in the air, that's the top of the crane. That's the starboard crane. So that's the right-hand side of the ship. Off in the far distance is the A-frame. In this case, it's not the best name. It probably should be called an H-frame because that's just the shape that it's in. And so we use that to pick things up and put things back over and move things around. And then we have the port crane is on the far side, and we also use that in a similar way. And between the starboard and the port crane, the right and left side of the vessel, we can pick up just about anything and move it all around the big working deck back here. And we do have a lot of stuff to move around. When we came on board the ship to start this project, we loaded 30,000 pounds of equipment. And a lot of it has been used, but actually a lot of it's still sitting in the shipping containers that it came in, because we bring spares for everything, because we are so far from home up here. If we wanted to go home right now and we wanted to just start driving right now, it would take us 7 days to get home without doing anything else, just driving, right? And if we forgot something and we needed it, there's no Amazon, there's no FedEx, there's nothing. We either have it here with us or we don't. So we bring a lot of spares. There's a lot of prep. We've been preparing for this project for 5 years. So the last thing I want to show you on the deck is this green object behind me. This is a big trawl net, which is used for trying to catch those itty bitty little fish that Franz just showed us. And so that net is a very specialized net. It's designed by some collaborators in Germany who have come to help with this project. And it has an acronym too. Everything's got an acronym around here. It's called the SUIT. So that's the Surface Under Ice Trawl. And that's what they just finished using. So that was towed behind the ship and then actually underneath the ice. And the design is for these tires to allow it to bump its way along underneath the ice, and then the opening there collects the fish, and all the fish end up at the far back end of the net in a little bitty collection jar. So it's quite a big operation to get a little thing, but that little thing is very unique. We don't know much about it. We don't know much about the animals that are able to survive here year round, and the animals that are fundamental to the ecosystem up here that support everything all the way on up to the polar bears. Okay, so let's see, we are about 20 minutes in. I think maybe we'll go back into the Baltic Room and then we can start doing some questions and see what you guys want to know more about out on the ship. Plus, I bet that the camera folks are getting a little cold. So let's go back in the Baltic Room.